The history of many of our nations, especially in Africa, has shown debilitating corruption, a prebendal race to the bottom of the pot by public officials and private sector individuals who see their positions and their offices and privileges as places to enrich themselves. But history has shown us that the trajectory of nations is shaped by the few, by leaders, by thinkers, by reformers and builders, especially those who choose not to exploit or walk away from the pain of their own people. Africa does not suffer from a scarcity of talent. It suffers from the underutilization of that talent for public good or for the public good. And we, the elite, and when I say the elite, I refer to those of us who have had the privilege of education, sometimes the privilege of influence, sometimes just the privilege of leadership in whatever state or category. It is this elite that determines where a society goes. So we, the elite, must ask ourselves whether or not we are using our privilege, our education, our influence, our exposure, merely for personal advancement, or are we harnessing it to uplift our communities? It is often said that Nigerians are individually some of the most successful persons in the world. And that is true in the professions, in business, and even in public service. It appears that in the pursuit of our personal ambitions, we're able to make phenomenal achievements. But when it comes to organizing ourselves as communities and working together to execute even physical infrastructure, to service our businesses, to service our social activities, to provide public goods for ourselves, to set the rules for justice and implement them faithfully, to secure our societies from internal or external aggression, we fall flat on our faces. This is the failure of the elite to make the personal sacrifices that can galvanize individuals to communal effort and incredible achievement. The great landmarks of history, no matter where you read your history from, the great social and political movements for universal suffrage, for civil rights, the anti-apartheid movement, all of these great movements were products of the blood, the sweat, and the tears, and the collective selfless effort of members of the elite of those nations. Today also, there are movements and advocacies for the improvement of the human condition here and there. Some examples: there is today an advocacy for people-centered development. There's this, and people-centered development is a paradigm that places the needs and voices of the vast majority, particularly those at the bottom of the pyramid, at the core of policy and planning. So people-centered development requires a decisive shift in policy frameworks from the trickle-down orthodoxies that generally are used in planning our budget to bottom-up and inclusive strategies. So budgeting and fiscal policy under a people-centered paradigm will prioritize investments in the well-being of the poor majority by funding rural health care, public education, and justice systems. All of this planned around the real social and economic circumstances of the majority of people. This is one type of advocacy that people are galvanizing around today. It requires champions. It requires dedicated people. It is the kind of service that our societies need. There are also advocacies around climate justice. Why should Africa, the least emitter of dangerous gases and the worst sufferer of the devastations of climate change, be asked to abandon fossil fuels, be asked to abandon oil and gas, and not be supported to make the transition to renewable energy? These are movements asking for fairness in the way that the world treats, especially poorer nations. There are also movements asking for a fairer global financial architecture, because Africa's poverty and debt burden is perpetuated by a financial system that makes it 5 times more expensive for the poorest countries to borrow than the wealthier countries of the world. So it is 5 times more expensive for Nigeria or for many of the other middle to low-income countries to borrow than it is for the wealthier countries. 5 times more expensive, which is why there is a continuous cycle of debt owed by several of the developing countries. So the advocacy is around saying we need a fairer global financial architecture. With the shutting down of USAID, 40% of humanitarian funding in the world has practically disappeared. 40% of humanitarian funding with USAID gone. Billions in public health projects in Nigeria is part of that loss. So there's an opportunity for all to play their part now in filling those gaps. These common causes, these causes for the common good, are fought for daily by committed activists, by academics, by professionals, and by ordinary people. The point to emphasize here is that service above self means promoting causes that do not necessarily benefit us alone or directly, but benefit the voiceless and the vulnerable in all of our societies. Causes that are bigger than ourselves and that may outlast even our own natural lives. Service is not always glamorous. It is often inconvenient. It's often uncelebrated, and it could even be costly. But it is necessary. To serve is to be a principled voice in politics, in business, a good steward of public resources, a mentor to the next generation. Service is not limited, as you know, to public office. It must echo in our boardrooms, in classrooms, in clinics, in courtrooms, and even on the streets. So let me conclude by making a call to action. Service is not an act of charity. It is an act of justice. It's not a substitute for government, but it's a partner in progress with government. And it's not just about giving. It's about being present, being there for the voiceless. It's about being principled and being committed. So as nations search for models of integrity and impact, Rotary, in my view, offers more than inspiration. It offers a blueprint for how values can drive vision and how compassion can be scaled through collective action. The blueprint, in my own opinion, must now be aggressively propagated, like the great movements that transform the world. Rotary must also see itself not just as a worldwide service organization, but as a catalyst for global change. Thank you very much.